And now we're going to get into negative numbers, which of course the calculator handles quite nicely. And we're going to learn how to do subtraction, and that's where we need to make sure we have negative numbers. And typically what happens is we have the real number line again, where there's 1, 2, 3, and so on going over here, minus 1, minus 2, and so on over there. And if I take 7 and subtract 3, you know, of course, I'm going to get 4. And you've learned that in school, no doubt. 7, and then the minus sign is the third key up. Minus 3 is equal to 4. But what happens if you take 3 and subtract 7? Well, the answer in that case then, if you take 3 and go down and subtract 7, you're going to go down to minus 4. You probably know that, but let's look at it on the calculator. 3 minus 7 equals minus 4. And now we've gotten into the negative numbers, and that often happens when you're subtracting a larger number from a smaller one. So for example, 13.2, subtract 29.8, and what would we get? Well, let's clear the calculator. 13.2 minus 29.8 equals, and I get minus 15.6. And that's all there is to subtraction. It's just that easy. Now, an interesting thing happens when we want to do things with negative numbers. For example, let's go back to the problem here of 3 minus 7. What I could have done is I could have taken 3 and added minus 7 if I could somehow get minus 7 into the calculator. Well, it turns out I can very easily. Let's clear the calculator. Let's take 7 and hit this little key next to the equal sign, and that'll change its sign to a minus 7. And then we're going to add 3 and hit the equal sign, and that gets us minus 4, which of course it was the same answer, but we went about it a little differently. Now this is particularly useful if we want to multiply numbers that involve negative numbers. For example, suppose you wanted to take 2 and multiply it times minus 3. Well, now you probably learned a long time ago that you just multiply the numbers to get 6, and then if you have a positive times a negative, you get a negative. Let's do that with a calculator and verify it. Clear the calculator. Now we're going to take 3. We're going to hit this little key next to the equal sign and make it a minus 3. Then we're going to multiply it times 2. We're going to hit the equal sign, and there it is, minus 6. So, for example, if we had 17.2 multiplied times minus 12.4, what would we get? Well, let's do that. Let's clear the calculator. 17.2 times 12.4, but before we hit the equal sign, we make it a negative number. Then we hit the equal sign, and sure enough, there is minus 213.28. It's just that easy to multiply a number times a negative number. And then lastly, what happens if we multiply two negative numbers? Say you had minus 3 times a minus 4. Well, you may recall from school that you may have learned earlier, you multiply the 3 and the 4, and if you have two minuses multiplied together, that gives you a plus. Let's verify that with the calculator. Let's take 3, make it negative, times 4, make it negative, hit the equal sign, and sure enough, there is plus 12. So as a general rule, multiplying two negative numbers equals a positive number. Now, I must say, this is sort of confusing to beginners when they first learn this. You may recall when you first learned it and how you felt about it. There's actually a very, very good reason for it that you will eventually understand, and it really hinges on something that you'll learn when you learn about complex numbers. Now, that's going to come in a later video, and after we learn about complex numbers, we're going to learn why the product of two negative numbers should be a positive number, why it's defined that way, and why it works that way. So that'll give you something maybe to kind of look forward to. I might add that there is a famous equation that I think is the most important equation in all of mathematics that we'll get when we study complex numbers, and this will just be one of the many, many byproducts of that equation. Now, I would like to look at some, I guess we'll call them a little more advanced operations with real numbers using a calculator. One of the things that you no doubt have learned is that if you take a number, say 5, and if you multiply it times itself, that is sometimes called 5 squared. That little 2 up there is called an exponent. And so 5 with a little 2 up there means 5 times 5. And of course you know the answer is 25. And that is called 5 squared. Well, on your calculator, you have a key that says x squared. So that means if you put in 5 and hit the x squared key, it'll do it for you automatically. And there's the answer, 25. So for example, if you wanted to take 1.34 and you wanted to square it, you would go to your calculator, clear it, put in 1.34, hit the x squared key, and sure enough, there's 1.80 is the answer. Now, that's just a convenience key. You could always do this problem just by multiplying the number times itself, but it's easy to do it more quickly this way. A similar key is the square root key. If you take the square root of 25, that's the number which when multiplied times itself gives you 25. Well, we know that this would be 5. I might also add there's a negative square root for every positive one. So if you take 25, hit the square root key, you get 5. Now that means if you square it, you get 25 again. So we'll do the square root key, you get 5. And even if I make that a negative 5, when I square it, I get back to 25. So a square root always has two answers. It has a positive and a negative answer. They're equal in magnitude, but different in sign. So you can take any kind of a number, say 17.89, and you want the square root. Now, there is no easy way to do this that I know of with a calculator unless you've got the square root key. And there it is, 4.23. Just to verify that that's right, let's square that, and there's 17.89 back. Now, as a matter of fact, this is a difficult algorithm to learn. I remember when I had to learn how to do this square root in school with pencil and paper, it was a pretty tough thing to learn, and a lot of kids had trouble with it. And indeed, it was always time-consuming to do it, so calculators really speeded that process up. Another key that's on most calculators that's convenient is called the reciprocal key. And if you take 1 divided by 7, you can do this with division, of course. 1 divided by 7 equals 0.14. By the way, I've got this fixed at 2 decimal places. I could have fixed it, say, at 5 decimal places. 0.14286. So there's the answer if you wanted it to 5 decimal places. Now, there's another way to do that automatically. Enter 7, find the 1 over x key, which is right there. My finger's over it, hit that, and there's the answer, 0.14286. So rather than enter 1 divide 7 to get the answer, you just 7 and hit the 1 over x key, and you get the answer. And that's a matter of convenience, and that's another key then that this calculator has to make life convenient. Now, these are what I would call the common operations that we will use with the calculator. The plus key, the minus key, the times key, the divide key, the square root key, the squared key, and the 1 over x key. Those are the common keys that almost any calculator has. And of course, there's a key that changes the sign of the number from positive to negative. And so that is what I wanted to show you on this particular video. And on future videos, we'll learn what a lot of these other keys do and mean. They're more, let's say, a little more sophisticated operations, although they're not really any more difficult, really. And we'll learn how to use them later. So this is Dr. Dell signing off. Have a great day. Talk to you on the next video.